Hi, hello out there, and welcome to the Insight Community Hour, or better known as the People's Hour, because we're here to talk about what the people want to talk about. I'm Mecca Williams, a principal engineer in the Hybrid Cloud Engineering Group here at NetApp. I'm not actually here at NetApp, but you get it. We're here today to talk about how to optimize your cost in your cloud experience. While I'm the host for the next hour, the star is certainly Spot by NetApp. We all know that cloud utilization is way, way up. If your workloads aren't in the cloud yet, somebody somewhere is planning for them to move to the cloud. Over the next hour, you'll hear from our community of specialists that will talk you through some of these new challenges and the awesome ways that they're addressing them. We have special insight editions of Ready, Set, Go Your Way, and All Access with the A-Team. Without further ado, here's Phoebe with Ready, Set.
Thanks, Mecca. Hi, everyone. I am Phoebe Go, and welcome to our Ready Set Community Roundtable on Cloud Cost Optimization. We've got an awesome lineup of speakers and presenters and panelists for you today, so stick around for the next 40 minutes or so as we dive into all of the ways to save money in the cloud. Many people are past that belief that going to the cloud is going to save you money. We understand that cloud provides agility and flexibility, and it gives us ways to build bigger and better new things. But one of those conversations that hasn't changed is how do we spend as little as possible to achieve those same outcomes? Or the more PC way of putting it, how do we optimize our cloud bill? We know from experimentation, and my credit card sure does, that cloud isn't necessarily going to be cheap, because in the cloud, we're paying for what we use or what we allocate, even if we're not using it all of the time. And I'll throw in here a Gartner stat that over 80% of businesses will overspend their cloud infrastructure costs this year. Whether or not you believe that stat, it sounds like there is a lot that we can learn about cloud cost optimization. I'm looking forward to learning more about this and diving right into it with our speakers and presenters today, and you too. So share your thoughts and your comments on our discussion on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so let's dive into the mysteries of cloud cost optimization. Today, we're going to hear from two excellent speakers on their perspectives and their experience in this area. And then we're going to jump into a roundtable. Our roundtable guests today are Steve Evans, Vice President of Engineering Services at Chegg. Chegg provides student services to over 2.9 million subscribers, or as one student put it, saving her college life. Steve leads the technical teams at Chegg, helping drive operational efficiencies and developing top talent. Josh Atwell, Senior Technology Advocate at Splunk. Josh was a data center and cloud automation architect turned to marketing. I'm guessing he turned to marketing for some of that sweet swag. Josh is great at breaking down complex topics into something that's easy for anybody to understand because he's been there and he's done it. Angela Timofte, Data Platform Manager at Trustpilot, an online review company founded in Denmark but now recognized globally with over 1 million reviews posted each month. Angela has experienced how rapid growth and leveraging cloud platforms has both helped and yet been a challenge for Trustpilot. But I said we're going to hear from two keynote speakers today, and so I'm really excited to be introducing them to you. Kevin McGrath, Chief Technology Officer at Spot by NetApp, where he guides the engineering organization as they build new features, optimize their products, and run it all in production. He's been working for software as a service companies for many years, though, and so I know he really understands the value of keeping developers productive and happy. And for our first keynote speaker today, I'd like to welcome Ben Keeps, a globally recognized technology commentator, board member, startup investor, and mentor. He's also a volunteer fighter and a Kiwi, so I both admire him and can't stand him at the same time. Ben has a depth and breadth of experience in the technology industry around the world, and yet he still finds time to give back to his community. So Ben, welcome to the Ready, Set Roundtable event. We are so excited to have you here, and I will hand over the floor to you.
Awesome. Thanks for the fantastic invitation and welcome. I am a firefighter, so if you hear a loud beeping and I run away, I've just gone to save a life, but no pressure. It's awesome to be here, and I'm cognizant that I'm actually speaking to you from the future. You can tell from my accent that obviously I come from the East Coast, not the East Coast of the US, but the East Coast of New Zealand. So it's tomorrow here, so it's a beautiful day. The world is fantastic. Trump didn't get in. Maybe we don't talk about politics, whatever. But I want to talk to you a little bit about cost optimization. And I want to take you on a little bit of a journey. I've been an analyst in this technology industry for about 15 years. And it seems like a lifetime ago, back in those days when a bunch of us used to hang out at the Santa Clara Convention Center for the Cloud Connect event and talk about cloud computing. And we were these renegades because the whole world was on premises. Everyone had servers in their basements and under their desks, and cloud was stupid. And why would you do that? And why would you use a subscription service? And why would you do on demand? Fast forward to today, and everything is cloud, everything's SaaS, everyone's using infrastructure as a service. Let's step back a little bit and look at what cloud did for us. I said before that in the old days, we all had server rooms, we all had data centers, we all had servers under our desks, we all paid for box software. And with the advent to the cloud, two things happened. Firstly, we had a business model change from CapEx to OpEx. So instead of spending $1 million on a data center, you'd spend X amount a month on data center capacity. The second change is democratization. And it's kind of a subset of that first thing. Because it doesn't cost $1 million to buy a data center, if it only costs a few $100, a few $1,000 a month or whatever, I can probably expense that on my credit card. So what that means is that whether it's software, whether I'm spinning up some SaaS solution, whether I'm doing some platform as a service, a bit of development infrastructure, or whether I'm actually buying virtual hardware, I can do it myself. And the interesting thing there is that there's some unintended consequences from that. I remember 15 years ago when only the geekiest of the geeky people would be spinning up servers on Amazon or on Microsoft or whatever in the cloud. Nowadays, everyone's doing it. Literally anyone who's got an expense account can or a credit card can spin up these servers. And the problem with that is you get a couple of things happening. First, you get people spinning up servers without actually thinking about the sort of server, the pricing, the performance, the attributes, all these sorts of things. Those people are also unaware of different pricing dynamics. There's no oversight for that. But then the second thing is that, we've all got kind of ADHD in this industry. We all want to go into the shiny new thing. And so we spin up a server, we do some amazing things. We create our incredible hello world that's going to change the world, and then we leave. But unfortunately, that still was still there in the background, spinning away, or not spinning away, but being paid for. And so these are the two aspects of the world that provide problems for organizations, for the accounting departments. I've been talking about for a long time around sort of cloudonomics and the need to really tie financial operations with technology, a way that the finance department can actually get a handle around what costs there are, what billing metrics there are, how many servers there are, what their landscape looks like, so that they can have some control. If you think about what a financial controller does with an asset register, for example, if you're an organization and you're the CFO and your organization owns 100 office buildings around the world, it's very unlikely that you'll just forget that you own an office building and one day someone will say, oh, look, you've got this building here. No one's been using it for 10 years. And yet with the cloud, that absolutely happens, and it happens regularly, and it happens all the time. It's really easy to do. And the problem is that accountants and CFOs think about different metrics. They think in different ways, and they don't have oversight. I mean, how many accountants look at a single pane of glass cloud dashboard? Clearly, they don't. They look at their ERP system and put their shiny hat on and have a big sign that says, no, you can't spend. I've been advocating for a long time for this connection between finance and operations. So it's really important to balance these two things. Democratization is fantastic. Democratization means that a world of incredible solutions, a world of incredible software projects have been undertaken that wouldn't have been before. It's legion, the number of organizations that have been saved by some curious developer in some room somewhere, spinning something up and creating something that saved her company. But we need to do that with control, and that's the really important thing. A lot of people, when they embark upon this conversation, it's very much couched in terms of we need to lock down, we need to stop. People can't spin up servers. We can't do this. There needs to be central control. And I actually don't think that's the case, because you have two options. You can lock down and not innovate and therefore die, or you can find safe ways of being open and encourage innovation and actually have successful business. The other thing that's really important, I just want to touch on very briefly, is the whole ROI piece. We have this sort of conceptual idea that cloud drives efficiencies, cost benefits, not necessarily savings, but cost benefits and outcomes for the organization. That's absolutely true. But as a professional board member, the fact is that we need metrics to show that. So the other aspect we need is, again, tying operations to the finance side. We can actually get a handle on that ROI. If I spin up a server today and I create this application and that drives this much revenue with this much net profit, then there's a very clear ROI there that's connected, as opposed to me simply spinning up a server because I want to do something. And 2 years later, the accounting department kind of taking a look and having no idea what the connection between the revenue and that infrastructure was. So to wrap it all up, cloud is an amazing thing. It's a democratizer. It changes business models. It moves things from CapEx to OpEx. It's a fantastic thing because it empowers developers and citizen developers within the organization, entrepreneurs, to do amazing things. But that doesn't mean it should be the Wild West. It doesn't mean we should lose control or we should stop having tight awareness around the spend, around the assets, around the return from that. So I'm really interested to hear from you, Kevin, around the organizations that you work with and what you've seen the drivers for this control aspect and that balance, that tension between freedom and democratization and tight control.
So thank you very much, Ben. And I also go back to the data center days, and it wasn't always beautiful back then. Sometimes when I was young, 20 some years ago, I'd walk past a server or a whole rack of servers in a data center, and we look at each other, you know what? What are these for? Can we turn these off? and no one would necessarily have the answer. So I think we've been dealing with somewhat of the same problem for a long time. But to fire back at you a little bit, we have these tensions between the engineers and the finance department. Who do you see who's the decision maker that's getting caught up in the middle there? Who's the one who, in your view, your experience, who do you normally see having to make this decision for the company and kind of, put the two sides in a room and say, hey, let's figure this out?
I mean, the reality is that the finance department is king or queen. So, when push comes to shove, everyone talks about empowering developers. Everyone talks about technology in the world and that being the future. But at the end of the day, if CFO says, no, you can't have this spend, generally that's what happens. And people find backdoor ways of getting that spend anyway, which makes things even worse again.
Yeah. I think we see kind of the same thing coming from where we come in the market is that, finance holds the keys, but engineers are crafty. Engineers want to engineer and they'll keep engineering new solutions. So I think that's a lot about what we're talking about today is, what can we do? Like what's that area where we can let engineers kind of run free and do what they want and not have finance freak out when they see the next bill. And I think that it turns into a bigger topic of, what we call spot cloud ops. It's how do you operate in the cloud? And there's really three pillars that put that together. It's DevOps, it's FinOps, and it's SecOps, and they all work hand in hand. They're all pieces of this stool, right? And you have your DevOps teams working day to day just to make sure that everything's available. And you can kind of extend that DevOps into like SREs or engineers, anybody who's pushing stuff to your production environment, anybody who's working on that every day. Then you have your FinOps vertical, you have your directors of cloud, you have your CFOs, you have people who are responsible for the bill, the business, the people who care about the bottom lines, the margins. Sometimes that doesn't always make it down to the engineers. They don't know what's going on necessarily with, how the cost of the product is actually being put together. And then, of course, you have security, and security is so important in the cloud. And I know it's always talked about and always thrown in the conversation, but it really is. Every single person in the organization nowadays, with things being accessible online and the way that we're moving from kind of walled off data centers into the cloud where it's access keys and not physical keys to get in the door. Everybody needs to kind of be concerned about these three big main pillars. What's really awesome about the cloud, and Ben, what you spoke of so great, is that people are kind of free to do what they want. We can develop so much faster. Back in the data center days, I used to have to, okay, when's the next hardware shipment coming in? Go down to the loading dock, get the server, throw it in the rack. I know we're going way back. But nowadays, you send an API call and you're up and running. And that's awesome because it brings us into the whole CI/CD era of computing, where it goes from developers' fingertips. And if you can get this to work at your organization and you're running, in a modern day application, it goes from the developer's fingertips into a system. It gets tested. It gets pushed out to a staging environment. You can have some manual eyes check on things. You can hit another button and you can get it out to production. Or in some cases, the whole process can be automated, and you can cycle very, very fast between getting code done and getting it to production, which is great. But the other problem Ben brought up is that sometimes the code gets out to production. No one knows what's happening once it gets out there. Or it's a best guess case, or you don't know, like, how much memory and CPU does this need? I don't know, 4 gigs, 16 gigs. Just throw it out there. Does it work? Are all my metrics coming in green? Awesome. I'm fine. I'm good to go. So we're missing something. We're missing something in this feedback cycle in this whole process. And that's what we're looking at and calling continuous optimization. So you get the code, you're getting it to production, you're moving fast, you're in the cloud. Who is watching that day-to-day operations? Who's making sure that the servers are scaling efficiently? Who's making sure that the commitments you're making to the cloud provider are the right commitments that you're supposed to make? Who's making sure that the memory and the CPU allocations of the applications as they run every day, scaling up, scaling down, doing whatever they need to do, who's making sure that is efficient? That's actually a huge cost to what's going on. And if you can get that feedback loop, if you can get back to the developers and you can tell developers and engineers and DevOps teams that we're confident that your applications are running, highly available 100% of the time, hopefully, maybe 99.9. And then on top of that, get back to the finance department and go, hey, not only are you scaling up or scaling down, but here's your efficiency rating. Here's how much you're spending in the cloud. Here's how much you're allocated in the cloud. And then here's how much the applications are actually using. And there's a lot of layers there, right? There's a lot to put together. And I believe that's why people are going out and they're looking for tools to kind of make this happen. It can't be any one person's job at an organization to just say, hey, go figure out our cloud costs. And going back to my question about who's responsible for this, it ends up at finance, and finance just goes, dollars, people, get them down, right? Just the dollars are too high, they need to be lower. And what we really need is a holistic conversation of what's going on, right? Like, how can the business keep going? How do you not stop engineers from doing what they love to do, which is pushing out code and making products better, and also keep the finance teams kind of moving in that direction? And there's a lot of different handles and metrics and things that you can use. I think the cloud providers don't make this easier on people. There's lots of different ways to buy compute. There's the traditional on-demand prices. You go to a provider, you see the on-demand price, it's $1 an instance an hour. Okay, I'm going to buy it. Then you have reserved capacity. You can commit to the cloud provider and say, hey, I'm going to run this 24/7, 365. I know it. Let me pay less. Let me pay 50% less. But then there's 5 different ways to pay for that. You have 1-year commitments, 3-year commitments. You have standard RIs and convertible RIs, and you have all these different constructs that you can buy. And then on top of that all, if you want to save the most amount of money, all 3 cloud providers provide what's called an excess capacity market. So you can buy compute at 90% discount off the prices. But then you have to orchestrate, well, how does that excess capacity market work? And what cloud providers do is they kind of pull that capacity back from you at any given time. So there's ways to not only right size your application, but there's ways to right size how you're actually buying your compute and buying your different services from the provider itself. And when you put all of these things together, I do think it becomes kind of a very complex algorithm. And having only one person or even a couple people at your organization in charge of doing that, I think is what leads people to try and hit or scatter for an easy button. And that easy button is unfortunately turn things off. And I think we need to get out of that. And I think what we need to do is find better ways to scale. We need to find better ways to get more data back to the people who need to make decisions. We need to understand that the people looking at the data aren't the people who are in the day-to-day, in the trenches, doing the dirty work all the time. And we need to show them how well or not well we're doing. And that's how we progress forward here. And that's how we allow everybody to kind of step up, let them do the jobs that they want, and then let finance be happy with the margins and everything else about the business that they need to do going forward.
Wow, thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you, Ben. I'm learning so much even just hearing you speak, and it's really clear that in this really fast-paced world of cloud, and I think we've heard all the kind of the statements like, data is the lifeblood of your business, developers are king. But I think what we're hearing is more of the nuance of that, which is that it's quite complex. As cloud service providers add more and more SKUs to their menus of options, it's starting to get more complex. You mentioned reserved instances there as well, Kevin, and I think developers as individuals, I think sometimes we don't give them enough credit. They're definitely really crafty. They're definitely finding ways to do things better. And I think it's not that they're not thinking about cost, but they're also thinking about how do we do all the things that we need to do in this complex environment. So I think that your comments, both Ben and Kevin, about communication and visibility and being able to see what you're spending, but then also being able to communicate that in terms that make sense to the rest of the business, I think those were really, really great points. And I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on those as well. And the one other thing that I heard that I thought was really, really critical was that once you've built something, and I'm guilty of this, and it goes out there and it sits in a server and nobody thinks about it, and maybe it's in production and maybe it's running some of your core applications, but once it's there in production, it's almost a different beast. And thinking about how you're managing that cost of that different beast is something that we maybe don't give enough thought to when we're going through that process of building it and iterating over the development. So I think I would like to open up this to the community panel where we have our other guests. And I'd like to throw this first one to you, Josh, because you've been a developer and you've probably had the finance people knocking on your door saying, hey, why was your expense bill so high? So I guess from your perspective, what are your thoughts on cost from a developer's perspective, and what kind of visibility do they look for, and what do they probably need in the future if they're looking for solutions?
That was a lot to tackle there. So I'll start. I'll start with something that Ben and Kevin were really touching on. In the past, we would have our data centers, and there would be resources there that would just be sitting idle, unused, and we weren't sure if we could turn it off or not. Part of the reason that existed is because developers did not trust the operations team to give them resources in a timely manner, and so they'd hoard those resources and then eventually forget about them. Unfortunately, with the democratization of cloud, that behavior never really changed, and those instances still exist out there. And there isn't really a great way for most organizations to identify, what those orphaned resources are. And I think the real challenge is empowering the consumers of the cloud services with information, with data, to give them insight into what's going under their account and what they're billing against, what it's active, and then giving them an opportunity to map that to an active project. Because as Kevin was pointing out, when finance comes and takes a look, they're going to go in assuming, usually correctly, that there is a lot of fat that can be trimmed from the utilization in the cloud. And until the consumers of the cloud, the ones who are spinning up those instances in order to support their activity, until they're able to demonstrate how those resources are being applied to adding the business value that they're charged with, they're going to have a hard time not being asked to cut.
I guess I'd like to ask Steve then. Yeah, what do you think? You run those teams.
First of all, I want to point out ops teams don't trust dev teams to come to them in time to provision the resources. So it's really your fault.
Right.
I think a key detail here is it a good quarter or a bad quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a good quarter from a financial perspective, the habit is not to pay attention. And if it's a bad quarter, all of a sudden finance is really interested in the big ticket items, which for a lot of companies means their cloud bill. And one of the things so in my role, I'm personally responsible for in our case, AWS spend. And one of the things I've tried to push really hard is that we're much better off paying attention to this every quarter and doing something rather than waiting for the crisis and doing a bunch. And it's a lot like personal health, right? If I wait until, my cholesterol's high and I've had a minor heart attack to start exercising, it's a lot more painful than if I maintain over time. But I think it's also important to remember, what's the goal? And, I'm at a company that's growing, I don't want to get the number wrong, but it's 30% plus year over year. And, the focus is less on the OpEx spend and more on the get the features in the hands of the students so that we can continue to grow like that. And coming in and saying, okay, engineering teams, I want you to really focus on optimizing cloud spend is only going to pull them away from what's actually going to grow the business. So there's a balancing act there. And you want to make sure you're attacking OpEx costs in a way that supports the business and not just supports one number on a financial statement.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, Steve. And that's why I think it's really important that everybody that's consuming cloud have something that's kind of giving them some ongoing visibility. Great example. I just got a notification from Slack, from the Slack bot that says, hey, these are 3 channels that you haven't been active in. Would you like to no longer be a part of them? Like that type of feedback loop is really necessary, and it's perfectly fine if those resources need to be used. But it doesn't, to your point, it doesn't need to be this push exercise once a quarter that everybody gets distracted with. We're completely on the same page with that.
I mean, you talked about growth though, and I think that's an interesting one. Like, as you grow an organization, it's like you can't just keep looking at it and having the one person go, oh, here's the 3 VMs you're not using anymore. Do you want to turn those off? Because this month it's 3 and next month it's 30. And in a couple of months it's, here's the 300 VMs you may or may not be using anymore. Do you want to turn them off? So Angela, you were going to add something to that.
Yes. I want to say that I couldn't agree more with what was said already, that you need to have a balance between what you're saving, but make sure that you're not stopping innovation. And what we've done to try and cut cost was actually show our engineer teams where the money are going and make them aware of what we're spending. Because as a developer, you just spin something. You have the power now, which I love myself, to have the power to just deploy something in a few seconds, right? But if I don't know the cost, I'm not going to worry about I forgot about 2 instances that I just deployed last month or so on. But once we made people aware about the costs, everyone started to look more and be more careful. But of course, when you show people how much you spend, then they might go in the opposite, where they are always worried about like, oh, but this is so much and we might spend this much, and they don't look at the bigger picture, where you're like, yeah, you spend a lot on this one, but you save in the long journey. And so it needs to be a balance between saving and innovation. You need to look at both and look at the bigger picture, not just at the dollars. Like, yeah, don't look at saving every penny, right? Look at making more.
We have a great example of that going on right now. Even though
Kevin,
we
you're on
provide a
mute.
service that's no.
I'm just kidding.
Ah.
I was just kidding. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh wait, you should be on mute.
I was like, what? Don't do that. I've done that. Anyway, very good. I'm just going to say we have a great example of that right now, where we not only provide a product that does savings, but internally, running the engineering team, we're looking at that all the time on what our spend is. But when we have new projects come up, we completely unleash the developers. Like, we have a project going on right now where cost is not the option. We know we do a very, very good job running efficiently for our production applications, our mainline products and features. We have a situation right now where we don't necessarily know what the right technology is. We don't necessarily know what the right way to go about it is. And we kind of just take the reins off and let them go figure it out, knowing that we can kind of lock that down again. So when you get in a good cycle of that, when you get in a good cycle of letting people have some rope, but then pulling it back, it is a pattern that can work. So we're going through that process right now.
And what does it look like, that process of, because I'm really interested in that sort of experimentation, but then you sort of throw it over the wall. What does it look like, that pulling the rope back? What does that feel like to operationalize that more sort of robust professional approach?
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes it's a bit painful, I won't lie. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it worked great, but man, we're not going to make any money if we do it this way, right? Like, you might just have to pull it back. Other times it's, we didn't know what we were doing, so we over-provisioned during the development process anyway. So sometimes it's just a natural cycle in and of itself. Like, especially we work with big machine learning models and stuff. It takes a lot of memory. Sometimes we work on new models, and those new models might take these huge machines until we figure out how to actually optimize the model, right? And then when we optimize the model, we can optimize the machines that it runs on. But the point is like, I'm not going to tell them, it's like, well, I'm not going to let you use the largest machines AWS has to offer because you haven't optimized the model yet. I want to see the business value. And then when I see the business value, I want to say, okay, we're there. Now let's get to the optimization value. Now, obviously, it all comes with some strings attached. I can't let the cloud bill just swing out of control for a while. But I do want the people we have at the company who do research and the people who have at the company who do look at new technologies, I want them to be able to evaluate those fully in a certain scope, and then bring it back. And then how we bring it back, then, like, it's kind of a different answer every time. I hate to whitewash it there for you, but yeah, it really depends on what the solution ends up being. Yeah.
Well, I think a big piece that we haven't talked about yet is the difference between forklifted, non-native, cloud-native applications and cloud architecture. And I think a lot of companies, I mean, I'd love to hear what Gartner says about what percentage of companies just forklift into the cloud. I'm guessing it's like 81.5%. And they have horrific OpEx spend, right? Because they've taken this thing and put it somewhere else where it doesn't fit. And anything good about the cloud, they don't get. And everything bad about the cloud, they get. And so for us, since moving to the cloud, we've made a huge push towards containerization, as well as managed services on the data layer, using Lambda, serverless, whatever. But the bulk of it has been containerization, which then really moves us away from, oh, you've got these servers over here doing nothing anymore, towards you've got a containerized service that maybe, scaling up and down based on demand. So worst case scenario, you've got a few containers running somewhere, serving up 0 real requests, right? The cost overhead of that is significantly lower than I've got these servers sitting here. And quick little plug for Spot, we run 100% of our container hosts on the spot market. So when you're paying 10, 20 cents on the dollar, like you really start to move from let's focus on innovation and not focus on costs. And a lot of it has been more on the data tier, which is hard to get away from. And then two, the legacy systems that are very static and require, that's where we're really hurting right now.
Angela, I know
every time I talk,
mentioned...
there's this big blank space, which means it's brilliant and everyone's just trying to process
We're just digesting, yeah.
No, we're just trying to translate.
Or it's horrible, and you guys are like, "What did he just say?"
Yeah, I think that's a really nice point though. It's like moving into the cloud versus building, like being fortunate enough to have a CTO who goes, go nuts, build whatever you want on the biggest virtual machines or biggest SKUs out there. I think a question, Angela, I have is like, at what point do you go, okay, we've moved into the cloud. This is probably costing more than we need. How do we, what do you do to pull it back? What's your your first reaction there to go, okay, is this how much it costs, or do we need to reduce that cloud spend, like, now?
Yeah, I mean, we have everything in cloud now. We're lucky. We are a young company still, right? So we didn't have like servers or anything like that. We had a bit of data on premise, but that changed very quickly. But yeah, of course, with the cloud, you can also like optimize, and that's what we constantly did as well. We had like a huge initiative to move all of our systems from EC2 to serverless, for instance. We didn't get there, but was a big move, and we've seen a lot of improvement moving to serverless. And one thing that we definitely notice is that once we give the power to a scheduler or someone else, it does it much better than us, remembering to turn off things or to do anything. One example I have with DynamoDBs, we thought like, no, we know how to scale them better than Amazon does. And if we put on demand, it's a bit more expensive, so we'll do it ourselves. And of course, then we did the analysis, and us spending a bit more for on demand, we saved a lot of money. So yeah, it's always, you can always improve. And I don't think I've seen any cases where we had to go from cloud and to say, okay, no, we have to be on premise because it's a much better option. The thing is, nowadays with all like serverless, you pay for what you're using, so you can't really get better than that, I would say, in my opinion, at least.
That is such a nice way to wrap us up, Angela, because we are all out of time. But I think there's some great points that you've all mentioned. But there's some great points. I really like the commentary there on like visibility, on the fact that how much the cloud is going to help your developers be faster, but then having ways to show them what they're doing and having that visibility, and then taking it that step further and automating it is even better. And so, if you want to keep this conversation going along with our panelists and myself, please join us on social media, on Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those places we are at. And so I'd like to thank our panelists today, Ben and Kevin. Thank you for your great presentations. To Angela, Josh, and Steve, thank you so much for adding your perspectives and your experience to our panel. If you're interested in ways that NetApp can help you with these cloud cost optimizations, if you heard the name Spot mentioned during this call and you want to know more about Spot by NetApp, check out cloud.netapp.com, and all the information is there. So thank you all again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you at the next Community Roundtable.
Wow, yes, I love it. Such great insights we heard from that group. I see lower cloud bills in everybody's future. Continuing on with the discussion, we have Insights edition of the NetApp podcast, Go Your Way, with Greg Neerman, who is the Director of Technology Evangelism and Influencer Relations for NetApp, and Maya Livni, who is the global marketing manager for Spot by NetApp. So I sort of envision this first wave of shocking cloud bills as sort of a wilderness, right? It's this wild, wild kind of jungle. And I envision FinOps as this thing that emerges and kind of tames this wild and brings some sort of manageable order to the wily cloud spend. In this next segment, Greg and Maya will discuss the importance of FinOps engineering and how it plays the key role in cloud cost management. So let's jump over to Go Your Way with Greg and Maya.
Thank you, Mika, and welcome to a very special episode of the Go Your Way podcast here at Insight 2020. On this episode, I'm joined by Maya Livni again, and our very, very special guest this week is Dever Mizrahi. And Dever, you have the distinction, I think, of being the first FinOps engineer that we've had on this podcast, and the whole idea of FinOps is, I think, new to a large part of our audience. If you could summarize what is FinOps and what does a FinOps engineer do?
Okay, so first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. If we're talking about FinOps, I'm going to separate the role and the culture, because FinOps, first of all, is a culture. It's putting a financial KPI on technical workloads that's used in cloud. And because the cloud is pay as you go, you're going to have to put some checks and balances in order to keep that financial KPI.
Thanks, Dever. I'm not sure that Greg mentioned it in the beginning, but you sort of founded FinOps department at Wix. So about that, I wanted to ask you, do you think what's the specific point of time or a size that an organization reach to that they need to start like overthink their whole strategy of cloud cost saving?
Okay, so first of all, the easiest answer will be from day one. So you're going to have to put some financial KPI on your workloads if you're working on the cloud. And even if you're a small company, medium company, or enterprise company, you're going to have to keep that KPI in order. In order to do so, if you want to put resources to that culture, what you want to do is to measure the ROI of running your activities on the cloud. So if you're under a positive ROI, keeping your budget and everything is fine, then it's not a critical issue. But once you move past that ROI to a negative ROI and your agenda is starting to cost more than your budget, then you're going to have to put some resources in order to keep everything in check.
You know, it's interesting. Throughout the course of this community hour, we've talked to different people about their angles, whether it's DevOps or whether it's migration and managing that cost and that cloud cost optimization. And the idea of having a structured best practice where you've got different parts of the organization that are contributing to watching those KPIs and optimizing utilization in a way that serves the organization financially. But also, I think there's an execution angle of this that gets a lot of benefit out of it. How do teams better optimize when they take on a FinOps practice?
Okay, so it's a huge conflict between dev velocity and putting some optimization agendas in place. So you want to run forward with technical developments, but you still want to keep the check in balance. To answer your question, it's all about educating the companies and the development teams about the cost and financial KPI, and to keep track of everything that we do on the cloud, even if it's on a day-to-day basis, to understand which kind of workloads the technical teams are deploying, and to keep everyone in check, given the visibility, the measurements, and everything in the whole ecosystem of providing visibility on cost on the cloud to the development teams, to team leaders, to up to the CFO. So from the technical point of view to the budget and financial point of view. I hope I answered your question.
Do you think when an organization starts wanting to save more on the cloud, because you mentioned startups at the beginning, but when you're running a few, like 10 workloads or instances, we're not talking about big money and big spendings yet. Should they expect more spent than saving at the first year or something like that? Because I will rephrase the question because I know there are so many mistakes when starting, and there are so many tools, and I don't need to tell you. So this is what my question is about.
Okay, so I think there is no right or wrong answer to that because it depends on the priorities of the startup. I do believe that there are many tools out there that can optimize workload without having the startup actually putting some resources on optimizations, which is something that everyone should consider because eventually you don't want to reinvent the wheel. But again, it depends because if you're running on a 10 instances setup and your deployment topology sums up to $1,000 a month, there is not much optimization left to do there, right? So eventually what you're going to have to do, eventually what you have to do is, as I said, to calculate the return of investment on your cloud activities from the budget and financial perspective and correlate between the two, because otherwise, it's just, you won't be able to measure your ROI for the FinOps culture. But again, as I said, it's going to have to be from day one because you still have to keep in mind the financial KPI.
I think about FinOps kind of like I think about DevOps, right? And it is a cultural mindset. And DevOps is starting to mature a little bit. We're seeing that evolve. How far away are we from seeing FinOps experience that same maturity? It feels like to me these are still early days for kind of the FinOps practice and the FinOps culture.
So I'm going to say something that I hope will answer a question, because you say FinOps, and I think we had that conversation before when we define it differently. So most of the FinOps we talked with here in Israel are from the financial side. They review invoices, they're checking the budget. We're coming from the engineering side. That's why I'm called a FinOps engineer or a cloud financial engineer. It's different because we're keeping track. I think if you're looking at the invoice, it's kind of too late to optimize. So you're gonna have to do it once you deploy it, like a gateway to your Terraform or to re-architecture your deployment topology. It's something that has to come from the engineering side to bring the most value.
I absolutely agree. Yep. And this is fantastic. And we could talk about this for hours, Devere. And I know you could. In our preparation for this, we talked a lot about this. There's so much to this. If people want to learn more, if they want to follow you, how can they find you and follow up with you with any of the questions they might have?
So I have a LinkedIn profile, and my work email is Dvir, DVIRM, @wix.com. Feel free to send me any messages if you have any problems or you want to just ping pong ideas. Feel free. If you want to share what you did in your company, it will be amazing. I'm all about knowledge sharing and building a community and FinOps. So hope to hear from you guys.
And like I said, we've only scratched the surface on this. There's so much more to this, and I'm looking forward to learning more. And Devere, I'm hoping we can get you back on in the near future. But I want to thank our audience for joining us during this community roundtable, this community hour here at Insight 2020. Maya, thank you so much for being my co-host again. And Devere, thank you for joining us this week.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Maya. Efficiency is key to cloud cost optimization. I'm sure we'll hear more about that in future episodes of Go Your Way. Wrapping up our Insight Community Hour, we have All Access with the A-Team. For those of you that don't know, the A-Team is a group of NetApp and Spot by NetApp partners and customers, and they're here to give us their feedback and practical perspectives on how some of the products and solutions that you've heard about right here at Insight are helping them with their real-world workflows. So tell us all about it, Barsha.
Thank you, Mecca. Hello, everyone. My name is Barsha Karki. I'm a pre-sales engineer at NetApp in Sydney, Australia. Today with me, I have two gentlemen here, Dan Frith, Head of Technology at Digital Sense, and Adrian DeLuca, Head of Partner Solutions Architecture, Global ISV Build Program at Amazon Web Services. Welcome, gentlemen. I will get you to say a little bit about yourself. I'll start with you, Adrian.
Hey, Barsha, thanks for inviting me along. Yes, I've been here at Amazon Web Services for about 4 years. I come from a software developer background and now leading up a lot of the initiatives around our independent software vendors.
Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Barsha. I'm Head of Technology at Digital Sense. I'm responsible for our cloud platform. We do a lot with NetApp storage. We do some data protection, a bit of objects, a bit of everything. So my day job is herding cats. That's pretty much us.
Awesome. Thank you. And great minds think alike. We are Team Black from the land down under. This wasn't coordinated, right? The conversation today between the three of us would be around Project Astra and Spot by NetApp. Two very exciting projects that we've got going on, and the acquisition as well. So let's start with Spot by NetApp. So have you had a chance to look around a bit more information around Spot by NetApp, Dan and Adrian?
Yeah, I've started to dig into it a bit, and I think it's actually really exciting. I think people sort of jump into public cloud and they don't always understand exactly what they want to, how they want to use it, how they want to best use it, and we're getting to that point now where people are starting to see real value in tools like Spot to give them a little bit of return on their investment with their cloud native applications, and I think that's really cool.
Adrian?
Well, yeah, thanks, Barsha. Well, we've been privileged to actually be working with Spot for quite a few years as a AWS partner before the acquisition. So, they were one of the early adopters of the EC2 Spot instances to really help customers understand how to best get not just the accessibility to the hundreds of instances that AWS has, but also the up to 90% cost savings. So really exciting to see where they've been bringing the product over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. It is very exciting. NetApp being the data authority, we look at data management and help our customers optimize their storage in the different environments. Now we've added this capability around compute instances as well. So your resources not just in storage but compute as well. So really excited about the expansion. And so, Adrian, you've seen the development of the organization Spot and the capabilities. How do you think it will help in the current environment? As customers are considering multiple environments in hybrid, multi-cloud, and digital transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at where Spot has predominantly been useful for customers, is their traditional stateful applications, those that that they've been able to refactor into stateless applications, and being able to leverage, as I said, the hundreds of different EC2 instances that we now provide in data centers. It really helps in being able to provide that benefit of decomposing a lot of the monolith applications into microservices, and start leveraging different fleets of these different instances. If you look now, we've got CPU memory optimized instances, and again, this is where EC2 has been really taking off. But if I look at where where Spot has been doing a great job, being able to heat map the different capacity capabilities or availabilities, I should say, in the different data centers, provide things like predictive rebalancing and app-driven provisioning. It really simplifies a lot of the task that's actually required on an operational perspective.
What I hear is it actually helps the lives of application developers, very essential and very significant in that dev test environment, because you're looking at how you're optimizing your resources, plus getting them back into that CI/CD cycle as well, right? And then optimizing further in the broader business. So directing my question to Dan now. So traditionally, we would be speaking with infrastructure leads and application developers. Who else do you think, in your role as head of technology, you could be having discussions with around a round table with the capability of Spot by NetApp?
Well, I think something like this really gives us the opportunity to bring NetApp to the table with a broader part of the business. So the traditional stakeholders like the infrastructure and application owners, I guess, are one part of the business, but really when it gets interesting is we can come to the higher level business owners and say, hey, we've got a really good story around the storage part of the the infrastructure play. We can do things with the cloud part of it, the compute part of it, and we can do this in a sensible fashion that's going to get you some real value back, and get, I guess, a better conversation happening around how that really helps them do the business of the business, which is always something we're really interested in talking about.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. So changing gears a little bit now, Project Astra. Dan, would you like to give us some insight around what your thoughts are around Project Astra?
So what I think is really cool around Project Astra is that it's bringing, I guess, the NetApp story around cloud almost to fruition, like the fact that there's a really robust framework attached to this, and there's an ability to tell the story more fully, not just around the data fabric or the cloud fabric, but what you can do with applications, containerization. That to me is a really compelling story, because we go to one vendor now and we say, hey, we need all this, and they go, yeah, we've got you covered. So I think that's what's really cool about Project Astra. Yeah,
awesome. Your thoughts around Project Astra? I know you're probably a bit new, Adrian, to the rest of the portfolio of NetApp. But what do you think about Project Astra and what NetApp is doing in that world of containers? As we see the shift from VMs to Kubernetes now.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, Barsha, what we've seen is that application portability doesn't always equal data portability, right? So being able to tie some of the capabilities around being able to take that stateful data volumes along with tying them to those different container classes and really unshackling a lot of the DevOps specialists and even the developers to have that choice has really made is going to make a really big difference. I mean, there's a couple of things that I really like. I mean, first of all, the fact that it's built on cloud volume services, right? It's a tried and true tested technology. A lot of you can go and launch those now on AWS through the AWS Marketplace and quick starts, so you can get going really quickly. Something that we love talking a lot around is that fine-grained controls. Being able to provide role-based access and volume binding, and being able to really control not just the access, but also the security of it. But again, infrastructure as a service, and being able to build CI/CD pipelines by understanding those different application dependencies, building it into code, being able to repeatedly deploy it, in multiple geographies. I think that's what we're seeing more and more of our customers wanting to do as they grow and scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it is a really wanted capability, that deep integration with an application, no matter where it's sitting. NetApp already has a product, Trident, that helps claim persistent volumes, right? But you're not just limiting to volumes anymore. You're actually have that tight and deep integration to applications, and the migration of applications at whatever time, whenever you need it. It's just so much easier now. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time today. It was such an insightful discussion and very fun discussion too. So appreciate your time. I will now hand it over to Mecca.
Thanks so much to the A-Team, and thanks to all of our program hosts, guests, speakers, and everyone for joining us for this past hour. What an amazing hour, and look how much we learned. I know you're probably ready to get in there and get started with your integration on cloud cost optimization. If you're interested in more details, head over to cloud.netapp.com. If you missed anything, or you just want to play it again, Community Hour is available on our social media channels on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Also, if you missed any Insight content and you want to hear about all the awesome technical breakout sessions, like mine, like yours truly, where I talk about Spot by NetApp at NetApp, head over to insight.netapp.com. Thanks again so much for joining us for the Community Hour. Now go forth and optimize. This is Mecca Williams signing off for the Community Hour. Have a happy rest of your Insight.